Hi everyone and welcome to Swedish Plant Guys. We get a lot of questions from you viewers and we read all of them, but we don't have the time to be able to answer you every question in writing. So what we do is that when we've gotten a question a couple of times, we put them together and we make a Q&A video like this one. Now we will put all of the questions in the description below with timestamps next to them. So if you're interested in a topic concerning a plant or concerning a way we try and handle our plants, then we recommend you to watch that topic, because you could get an answer to your specific question even if it's not your question that we are answering. So if you want to skip forward to a topic, you can, but we always recommend you to watch the entire video to get as much knowledge as possible on all of the plants that we take up in our videos. Now, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do, and hit that bell as well so you get a notification every time we put up something new. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, that helps us a lot, and of course share with your friends as well. Now, starting off with question number 1, and this is concerning our all you need to know on fertilizing your indoor plants video. Now we will put a link to that video in the description next to the question below, so if you want to go and watch that, you can. The question is, what are the symptoms of water-oxygen imbalance? Are there specific symptoms? Okay, one of the most common problems we get with plants indoors is an imbalance of water and oxygen in our system or in our pots. Now, if we have too much water, we get a problem. If we have not enough water, we get a problem. Usually we talk about the water, but there is a balance here, always a balance between water and oxygen. When we give too much water, what we're actually doing is that we are pushing out the oxygen. So we get an oxygen deficiency when we have too much water. And on the other hand, if we don't have enough water, we will get a lot of oxygen in our soil or with our roots. And when we get too much oxygen, we have a problem as well. Now, are there specific symptoms? Yes, there are a couple of things you can look for. If we give too much water, which is the most common thing on how to kill your plants indoors, because what happens is we see on our plants that they are starting to droop a little bit. Oh, I've forgotten to water my plant. And what do? Well, you go out, you get your watering can, and you give it some water, like you usually do, and then you think, I'll just give it a little bit more because it looks so sad. Now what happens is that when you add that extra water that you're not used to adding that plant, you're actually pushing away a lot of the oxygen for the roots. Now what happens then if we give too much water is that the roots are going to start to damage. And one of the indicators here is that your plant will stop growing. That is one of the symptoms that you get. It will stop growing. It looks quite well still, but it stops growing. And what can happen is that you can get something called root rot. Now, root rot is a fungus that attacks the roots when they're too wet, when there's too much water. Now, even if you get root rot or if just damage to the roots, what will happen is that the older leaves will start to hang down a little bit. But the newest leaves on top are still standing, still looking good. What actually happens is that the plant prioritizes here. And the newest leaves are always priority 1. So it pushes out water to the top of the root, to the top leaves, but there are too much water or too little oxygen for the roots. So it can only sustain the top, not the oldest leaves. And the oldest leaves are not as important. So they will start to droop. They will not get water. They will not photosynthesize. They will start to droop. And it's just focus on the top. Now what can happen also is that on that older leaves, you will get brown spots in the middle of the leaves. You can also get brown soggy tips. The tip of the leaf will start to get brown and it will be droopy and a little bit almost wet. That is also an indicator that you have given your plant too much water. It's not getting enough oxygen. So what happens is that parts of the leaves and parts of the plant are dying. The cells are not getting enough air. Now, on the other hand, if you are not giving your plant enough water, it will get too much air for the roots. What happens is that a lot of the roots are going to start to decompose. They're going to stop working. And that means that it doesn't have enough water and it won't be able to push water up to the foliage. So if it can't push water from here up to the foliage, you will see that on the plant that it will start to wilter. Now, usually you can just see it on almost any type of plant, that it's just going to start to droop. Now, in this case, when it starts to droop, even the newest leaves, or especially the newest leaves, because that is where the priority for the plant is. That is where it pushes most of the water, is up to the newest tips. When they start, they will be the first one to start to droop and start to hang, and then all of the plant will start to hang and sog a little bit like this. That is an indicator that you haven't given it enough water. And if you leave it like that for a longer period of time, more and more of the roots will start to stop working. It will start to die. So what would happen then, when you notice this and you add water to your plant, a lot of the roots could be damaged to the point that they can't push water through them anymore. So even if you give water to your plant, you can see that it's not helping. And that is because a lot of the roots have had too much air for too long period of time. So it cannot push the water anymore. Now these are the indicators. And one of the things you can look for then is actually the apex of the plant, the top of the plant. If that starts to droop a little bit, you have probably an imbalance that says you have too much you have too much oxygen and not enough water. But if the tops are still looking good, they're still standing, but the other parts of the plant is starting to droop, or you get brown spots on the leaves, then you have a big problem, and that problem means too much water and not enough oxygen. Moving on to question number 2, and this is concerning our All You Need to Know About Pumice video or volcanic rock video. Now we will put a link to that in the description below next to this question as well, so you can go and watch that video after this. Now the question is, during the 12 years you've planted in pumice, have your plants ever developed root rot? This is a good question because we say in that video that the pumice has a capacity to maintain quite a lot of water. Now, will that eventually give us root rot? And I would say yes, we have gotten root rot in pumice. However, we get it so more often in normal soil. And the reason here for that is that, as we say in that video, the pumice is only able to absorb around 30% of its volume with water. Then it will drop the excess water down to the bottom of the container. It cannot hold more than that. Which means, and it also means that a big part of the volume is still air. So you have that perfect balance of water and oxygen within those stones, individual stones. So we have never seen that we've gotten root rot in the upper portion of the pot. I'll explain that even further. Now, if we have this pot filled with pumice, now it's soil here, but if it were filled with pumice, the pumice from here almost down to here will never get that much water that you will get root rot, because the pumice cannot hold that much water. So the access falls down to the lower portion of the pot. Now if you don't have drainage holes here, there will be water collecting in the bottom of the pot. Here you could get root rot. However, our experience is that since there will be a lot of water in the bottom of the pot almost all the time, because all of the excess water goes down there, what happens is that the plant actually develops water roots in the bottom of the pot. So you have normal pumice or soil roots in almost all of the container, and then you have water roots down in the bottom of the pot. So it has happened, yes, but usually the plant solves this, which also means that the plant is feeling even more well. You have that perfect balance of water and oxygen in almost the entire pot, and down in the bottom you have water roots that only live in the water, in the excess water. Moving on to question number 3, and this is a question that we've gotten on another Q&A video, and we want you to give us as many questions as possible. Please don't hesitate to put your questions in the comments below. Now the question is, I'm struggling with the care of my Schefflera plant. I bought it in early May this year and it's been getting worse and worse ever since. I water it every other day and it's standing in a window with medium sunlight. I let it dry out a little bit between watering. It's gotten yellow spots on the leaves and it's losing leaves as well. I haven't got a big enough pot to make a self-watering system, so I was wondering if I could use a watering globe instead. What am I doing wrong? Can I save my plant? First of all, we will be making a all you need to know video on the Schefflera. This is one of my personal favorites to have at home, and it's really easy to care for. However, there is a quite common problem, and you've gotten that common problem here. It seems to me that you're taking care of it in the right way. The Schefflera needs a lot of light, so it needs, and it likes to have a little bit of sunlight on it. You can even put it in a southern window where you have sunlight all day and it will just thrive. It loves to get sun. So you're doing that well. It also wants to dry up a little bit in between waterings. It's not a necessity, but it can do that. I usually do it as well to my Scheffleras, so perfect. However, a common problem is that your Schefflera is looking really well. It's growing and everything is fine. And all of a sudden, you see that on the tops, the newest leaves, they start to turn a little bit yellow. They get small yellow spots on them. And it looks like this. I have a couple of plants here that are in different stages of this, and I'll show you here. And this is usually what you see first. The newest leaves here, when they start to grow out, they are a little bit paler in color. That's not something you have to worry about. It will, as it gets a cuticle, when it gets to be more mature, they will get that dark green color as well. However, if you look at this, you can see that on the leaf, you're starting to get small yellowing spots on the tops of the leaves. It's not much yet, and this is usually what you will see, that there are just indications that there are a small yellow spots on the leaves. Now, if you don't do anything about this, what will happen is that it will turn into this. It will get more and more yellow leaves on the newest leaves here, yellow spots on the newest leaves. Some of that yellow will turn into a reddish brown as well. And the next thing you will notice is that it will start to lose its leaves. Just green leaves will just start to fall straight off. If you can see on this plant here, it actually has one side. It has started to lose leaves on this side. I'll show you on another one here. Here you can see it's started to lose leaves on each of these small branches, but it's also starting to lose branches all the way into the stem here, into the trunk. Now, what has happened to these plants? Well, they have gotten pests. There is a pest that attacks the Schefflera, and the first thing you notice is just that, what I showed you, these small yellowing of the newest leaves. Now, if you go out and buy a standard pesticide that covers most indoor pests, and you start to treat your Schefflera directly, according to the instructions on the pesticide, this will just stop and you don't have a problem anymore. However, if you miss this and it goes past that point and it starts to look like this, you have a bigger problem. Because now you need to treat it and retreat it and maybe retreat it again, because now you have so much on your plant that just one go will not kill all of them. So you will have to go a complete coverage of the pesticide for your plant. Now, my recommendation is, as soon as you notice that you have a little bit of a yellowing on the newest leaves on your Schefflera, use a pesticide or mix up some normal green soap with water and spray that on the plant. And this will help you take care of that problem. What you do then is that when you see that the plant is starting to feel good again, it's starting to send out new foliage, then you go in and give it some fertilizer. Start to add fertilizer when you're watering your plant, because as I usually say, we never ever give fertilizer to a plant that is not feeling well. If it has pests, it's not feeling well. So make sure that you get rid of the pests, and when you see that new growth, when you see that, okay, the pests are probably gone, you go in and you add some fertilizer to help that plant to create that new flush, that new green foliage, and then it will survive. So that is probably what has happened to your Schefflera here. So I would recommend you go out, buy a pesticide, treat your plant, and when you see that it's feeling good, add fertilizer, and then you're well on your way to become, it will become better. Moving on to question number 4, and this is concerning our all you need to know about the dragon tree or the Dracaena video. And you can go and check that out. We'll put a link in the description below next to this question. Now the question is, why do the leaves on my Yucca droop downwards when the plant is indoors, but stay upright when the plant is moved outdoors? Does it mean that the plant is not an indoor plant and only an outdoor plant over here in my part of the world? And your part of the world is in Melbourne, Australia. The drooping leaves indoors doesn't make the plant look sick, but the upright leaves are much nicer. What should you do? Well, this is not concerning, obviously, the Dracaena. And this is a usual problem because people usually see the Dracaena and the Yucca elephantipes as the same plant. It looks quite similar, it acts quite similar, you take care of it in a similar way. But they are not similar. They are two completely different plants and should not be treated as the same plant. And the reason is that the Dracaena is a tropical plant. It lives in the southern parts in Southern America. They need a lot of warmth, they need a lot of humidity, and the night temperatures or the temperatures during the year should never go below around 15-16 degrees Celsius. However, the Yucca is not a tropical plant. Here in Sweden we call it a Mediterranean plant. I think the correct word is subtropical plant instead. That means that it reacts a little bit different to humidity and to cold. And the yucca can actually withstand colds down to around just above freezing, so around 5 degrees Celsius. And it also doesn't react well to low humidity. Actually, it reacts quite poorly to low humidity. So what is happening here is that when you have that indoors, what's happening is that you probably have a high temperature indoors. You could also, if you're in Melbourne, Australia, I think you have quite a warm climate. You will have, in the summer, you will have a lot of heat indoors. You will get a lot of humidity. And since it's not a tropical plant, that very high humidity will not be good for the plant. So what happens is that the older leaves will start to do like this. It will start to droop. And that's because of the humidity you have indoors. Now in winter time, you will drop that humidity and it will probably go down quite low. Here in Sweden we have that problem because when we have a yucca indoors in winter time, you have quite very low humidity indoors. And the exact same thing happens. The yucca says, ugh, and it starts to droop. It can't really handle that type of humidity. Now the Dracaena handles it quite better because it's a tropical plant. But no, it's not an outdoor plant. Well, it is in the Mediterranean area. It is an outdoor plant. You can have it outside all year. But what I recommend you to do here is that you put this plant outside if you have that option during the summer, during spring, summer and autumn. And when you see that the temperature is going down a little bit too much, then you take it inside. And you keep it inside over winter time and then you put it out again. I think that would be the perfect thing for you. And then it will reward you by having leaves that are a little bit more upwards facing. But know this, that the yucca, after time, when it gets older, this is not the usual way the leaves are pointing. When it gets older, just like the Dracaena, this is more the real older look of a yucca. So it can also be that when it gets old, you will get those little bit more hanging leaves. So when it gets older, it's not actually droopy, it's not feeling bad, it's just the natural way. Just like as it gets older, it starts to drop the leaves a little bit. So it's a perfect and natural thing for an older yucca. Moving on to question number 5, and this is concerning our all you need to know about the Dracaena or the dragon tree video. The question is, I just received one of these as a gift and I noticed that many of the top leaves are much paler than they should be. It's definitely not a pest problem, so I wonder what the problem is. It also needs repotting as the roots are coming out of the bottom of the pot. Okay, so for a Dracaena, it's quite common that the newest leaves, when they are quite small, they have a lighter color to them. That is fully natural. However, they shouldn't be pale like you describe them. And by pale, I mean it looks like they are losing the color. Not that they are a shade brighter, but that looks like they are losing the color. It almost gets a little bit transparent. Now what you have is probably one of two things. Now the most common one is actually what you say it's not here, and that is a pest problem. Because one of the common pests that attack a Dracaena is mites. Thank you. It's mites. Now mites, you can't see mites. They are so small that when you see that there are something on your Dracaena, there are millions of them. They are so small. And they always attack the newest leaves first. And when they attach to the leaves, they start to suck out the nutrients of that leaf, and it goes pale. So this is probably what you have. You have a pest problem, but you can't see it. So my recommendation to you is that try and treat your Dracaena. Go out and buy a pesticide that treats mites, and look specifically at that pesticide that it covers mites, because the standard normal pesticide in the stores usually doesn't cover mites. It covers everything else like mealybugs, and but it doesn't take care of the mites. So make sure you get one that does, and then treat your Dracaena. Because if you don't and it gets more of those mites on them, it will be much more difficult to get rid of them. So go out straight away and buy a pesticide. Try and get rid of them, because it's probably that. The second thing, it could be, but I'm not so sure that it is, but you actually take it up here. You say that you have a massive root system. The roots are actually starting to come out of the pot. So the second thing it could be is that you have a nutrient deficiency, because that is one of the indicators also when the leaves start to get a little bit pale, they lose their color. It could be a deficiency in nutrients. So what you do about that is that you repot your Dracaena. Make sure to use a soil that has good drainage, but a standard soil that you can get anywhere, but you could mix it up with some pumice or some perlite or something, get a good drainage, and then you start to add a fertilizer when you water your plants. Now make sure that it dries out completely, and you follow all the instructions we have in our video, of course, but you can start to add a little bit of a fertilizer. So it's one out of two things. It's either pests or it's a nutrient deficiency. But I think you have the first one. So I would go out and buy a pesticide. Now that's all for this time. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a thumbs up. We really appreciate that. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. And hit that bell so you get a notification every time we put up something new. As mentioned before, we read all of your questions, so please just give us questions and we will try and make Q&A videos for you guys to try and answer all of them, or as many as we can. Now until next time, hej då!